and welcome back to a new episode of the Women's Strength Society show. Today with the topic, what every woman needs to know about macronutrients.
And it's an important topic because it's not only about, losing fat and leaning out and creating shape and that sort of things. A lot of people talk about macros and food tracking on social media as if the only purpose of doing this was to lose weight and that it would turn into something obsessive and unhealthy. But what we see is in a lot of situations that women don't actually know how to nourish their body with enough food. And sure, like at times you go into a fat loss phase where you go into a calorie deficit to lean out, but this is like a tiny fraction of the whole transformation journey. And if you zoom out, far enough of your whole life, you're going to spend most of your life not eating in a calorie deficit actually, or it should be that way. But a lot of women just don't know how to do that because they've never been taught, and men haven't either. I know it wasn't the case for me, so and for my brother too. So it's a very important topic, and it's not only about leaning out and eating less, but really understanding how to nourish your body.
I think getting into like food, like tracking my food and understanding macronutrients and how much of what I specifically need for my body to fuel my body definitely changed not only my physique, as you said, because you can use that as a tool to manipulate how much body fat you carry, right? You can lose body fat, you can gain muscle mass with the help of strength training as well. But it really changed my health and my well-being, because I remember before I started really tracking my food accurately for now 5-6 years, I was already focused on eating healthy, eating clean, trying different kind of diets, be it low carb, be it paleo, be it
the blood type diet.
Going vegan, all those things. And I never knew how to fuel my body properly. And before I even got into like fitness and got a little bit of an understanding of what it means to like eat healthy and fuel my body, I was not paying much attention to that at all. So my parents didn't teach me anything about nutrition. I'm from a Balkan family, so it's very high in like everything. Right? It's
Jako puno, jesti.
Jako puno, jesti. It can be very fatty, it can be very high carb, but we also have a lot of meat, so it's just a lot of eating in general.
Just not so much vegetables.
Exactly, not so much vegetables. I also was never a fan of vegetables. I mean, vegetables seem boring, who likes them? And then I left home and I was cooking for myself, or I was not cooking for myself because I also didn't learn how to cook, right? I was never really interested in like cooking, not like, for example, my sister. But I was finding myself eating a lot of packaged food, processed stuff, also like a lot of on-the-go meals and snacks across the day. And like in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I understand why I had like so many health issues with like my digestive system, like bloating and IBS and histamine and gluten intolerances and stuff like that. Like I was like, nothing is working. I'm always looking like I'm, 6 months pregnant after eating. What's going on with me? And also like losing my period and not being able to regain that back definitely also played into, or the not fueling my body also played into that as well. Because how can you expect that your body and all the systems in your body are functioning well if there's just a lack of certain nutrients that your body needs? And today we're talking specifically about macronutrients. You can go also one step further and go into micronutrients, which is a topic Yannick loves. So maybe this is a podcast episode for another day.
For sure, because this is,
It's huge. It's huge. And so today we will cover macronutrients so that you just understand better the differences in the macronutrients for those of you who don't know, but then also what changes it makes to pay more attention to one macronutrient but then neglect the others, or the other way around, right?
Yeah.
So the ratio of those macronutrients that you're eating across the day.
And so we have like 3 points that we are going to share about macros and what you need to know. But before we go into that, I just want to add one thing. I find it very interesting because when you watch social media or you hear like expert talks on podcasts, very often they are somewhat biased against tracking foods and tracking macros. But the very first thing that I learned when I did my certification as a personal trainer and the nutrition license, it was simply like, hey, you have to track your food so that you understand what you are eating.
Yeah.
And like again, tracking your food is not only about changing your look and your body composition. It's, as you were saying, like supporting all the systems that you have in your body that needs fuel to thrive. And tracking your food is going to create so much awareness, not only around your food and what you put in your mouth, but also about how your body function and how it reacts to different food intake. So again, this is quite advanced. Like, there's no denying that tracking your food and trying to be accurate with tracking your food is something that's quite advanced. Not everybody does that. But if you really want to, to bring your physique, but also your health and your well-being to another level, then this is going to be a huge stepping stone into doing that. And so the very first thing is, and I've told Dragana that so many times, is you need each macro to every meal. So each macro, we have 3, fat, carbohydrate, and protein. I'm pretty sure you've heard about that. But quite often, and in the diets that you mentioned, there are a few where you try to cut entirely one food group or one macro group. This is definitely going to fail you at some point in some situations. And if you want to, have good energy, but also regulate your hunger and support your digestive system, then eating all 3 macros for every meal is definitely going to make a pretty big difference.
Do you remember my food diary on my phone and my notes?
Yeah, I do remember.
I think it was from like 2017 or 16, 17?
17, I think.
17 probably. We found it like a couple of weeks ago on my old phone in my notes app. And I was like, oh my gosh, this was the time where I was not tracking my food, but I was trying to keep a food diary. Like, I was writing down the time I was eating and then what I was eating so that I can make sense of the symptoms that I was experiencing back then. And as I said, looking back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, this was just fucked up. Like, I didn't know like what I was doing there, and no wonder that I was constantly hungry, that I was constantly bloated, that I was having like energy crashes, like all those things, feeling like sluggish. Although I was in my like mid-20s, I should be glowing and thriving, but that was not the case. I was not feeling great in my own skin. And so it's interesting now, because now I know that, right? But back then, when you were telling me like, hey, Dragana, you need to eat all 3 macronutrients with every meal, I was still not paying that much attention to it.
Yeah, and I was telling you this because, and I think this is going to really illustrate why that's important and what kind of difference it can make. But when I was telling you this, it's when we first got together. So I was not only seeing what you reported you were eating, but I was actually seeing you eat the thing in real time. Like, I was seeing your meals, and for me it was somewhat easy to connect the dots and be like, hey, you're hungry right now because your breakfast had no protein, for example, or no fat at all. And then, you'd go the whole day without really eating any proper protein source. And then it was like in the evening, okay, we are going to do some salmon. And I remember like you eating like 250, 300 grams of
to get my protein in.
Of salmon to get the protein in, and then after that it would be like,
I was so bloated and like it was like, ugh.
Just feeling stuffed, and then after that we'd have the pre-bed snack. It was like a huge cereal bowl. And then of course, like when you eat that much, then you are feeling like super heavy and like you have a break in your stomach. But at the same time, it also means that the whole day before those two last meals, the whole day you were kind of underfed, underfueled. And it was also specific to the macronutrient, because I remember that the breakfast were not like that small.
Yeah.
The lunch weren't that small either, but there was always something missing. And in your case, it was a bit too little protein. So you can go like, even if your if your overall intake throughout the day, at the end of the day, matches what you need, but if you skip one macro or two for one meal, and then compensate with others for the macro that you missed, then you are not going to feel well. You are going to be hungry, and you are most likely going to have like energy roller coasters, up and downs.
And I remember, just to finish that point, but I remember then blaming protein, right? Because I was,
of course,
right. It's so interesting. And I see that also with women that come to us. It's like, sometimes it's this like, I don't tolerate this much animal protein or whatever it is. But then it was like, for me, it was just like that one portion of that, the salmon in the evening, 250 gram, which was just like huge, was just too much in one sitting. So I didn't had any problem with like eating protein. I thought protein is the problem. Protein is what causes me being bloated, blah, 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 blah. That's why I was skipping it over the course of the day. And for breakfast, not eating no protein at all, but definitely lighter in protein. And in the evening, I had to catch up on my macros, right? But I was then blaming this. And we have the same with, I see that all the time with, for example, carbs, right? So you would then maybe eat too much carbs in like one sitting, then feeling tired afterwards. And you are like, oh, carbs are giving me this huge energy crash after that. So carbs are the problem. I need to skip the carbs. I should eat less of that. My body is not tolerating. And like, this is then the narrative that comes up a lot of times, when it is not really about the macronutrient being a problem, or you are not able to tolerate that macronutrient, but it comes down to like how you're structuring your meals and your meals across the day as well.
100%. And I mean, if you have like macro targets that you are trying to hit right now, then the best way to, or the easiest way to go about that is simply to say like, okay, I have like 3 or 4 meals per day. I would recommend 4. Then you are going to divide each macro targets by 4, and then try to have like balanced meal. Balance in the sense of like 1 quarter, then 1 quarter, then 1 quarter, then 1 quarter, and then at the end you have hit like all the macro targets. But it was well spread throughout all meals throughout the day. I was thinking, as you're saying that, I was thinking like, okay, if your body was a car, trying to make an analogy to make it like very vivid. And the fat is the oil that you put into the engine, so that every pieces can work together well, glide properly. Then you have the fuel, that would be the carbs, and then you have the protein, that would be, for example, spare parts, like a new seat or a new driving wheel, or
new tires,
that sort of things. What you want to imagine is, every now and then you are going to need like those spare parts, and every now and then you are going to need the oil, but you never want to go too low, never want to go too high, because if it's too high, then it's going to drip into the engine, and then there's a risk of turning into a fire. If you have too many spare parts, then what are you going to do with them? Are you going to just drive with like 4 new wheels into your truck? And then if you have like way too little fuel, then you cannot drive. And if you have way too much of that, then it's also going to drip, and maybe because of the heat of the engine, then it could also start a fire, which you definitely don't want to have. And so what you want is to make sure that it's enough, but also not too much at the same time. And if you are actively trying to cut out one of those, then you are pretty much guaranteed that at some point you are either going to miss a spare part or have too much of that you are going to miss fuel or have too much of it, or that you are going to miss oil and have too much of it. So this is...
Thank you for that analogy.
Yeah. You're welcome. All right. Second point is understanding the macros, right? So we have 3 macros, and we have the fat, the carbohydrate, the protein. And so the protein is going to be broken down into amino acids, and they are going to be used to build back up different type of protein that you need inside your body. It can be your muscle, but there are also a lot of other stuff that happens inside your body that need protein that is not related to muscle. So a lot of hormones, for example, they need amino acid to be built. Obviously, your skin consists of collagen, which is a protein. So you need amino acid for that. So you eat the protein, it gets broken down in your stomach, and then it goes into your bloodstream, and then your body is going to rearrange them however it sees fit and needs them. Then we have the carbohydrate. The carbohydrate are mainly there for energy and for your gut bacteria. So fibers are a type of carbohydrate, and you need that to feed your gut microbiome, which is going to have a massive impact on your whole body because it's going to help manage inflammation, but also let through all the nutrients that you need. So that's going to be the macronutrient, but also the micronutrient. And yeah, super important. Also the the carbs, you need that for your brain. Even if you are in ketosis, then at least 25% of the energy that you need for your brain is going to come from glucose, which is quite a lot. You need that for your red blood cells that can only operate with glucose, meaning that if you have no glucose circulating in your body, you cannot transport oxygen with your red blood cell, which means you die, which is not pretty fun. And yeah, of course, your muscles, like every movement that you do is going to be fueled mainly by carbohydrate, especially as the intensity goes higher during your workout. More on this later. And then fat is going to be helpful for taste, which is important. It's going to help slow down gastric emptying and how fast your carbohydrate go into your system. So it's going to make sure that the energy is delivered in smooth and steady way, which is very important because sometimes we feel like, I have a dip in energy from the carbohydrate, and it's not even that it was too much carbs. It's just that the fat was lacking. Yeah. So I wanted to mention that because you talked about that experience.
Yeah, that was happening to me. Like I was eating a lot of carbs for my lunch. I was skipping fats completely, and after that I had an energy crash, and I was also not satisfied with my meal. I was like, I need to eat again. Like I'm still hungry, although I had this big bowl.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's also important for satiety.
Yeah, and so the last macro, there's one more. We don't really talk about it because we recommend not to eat it or to drink it. Actually, it's alcohol. And this is definitely not essential. This is not something that you want to consume a lot of for your health, but also for your body composition. And so we just want to mention it because it's there and it does deliver energy, but we advise against consuming it. And so each of those macro, they give you a certain amount of energy per gram or per unit of quantity. And 1 gram of protein gives you 4 calories. 1 gram of carbohydrates also gives you 4 calories. But 1 gram of fat gives you 9 calories. And because we just mentioned it, alcohol, 1 gram gives you 7 calories. Now we are going to stop talking about alcohol and then focus on the other macros.
It's not that we are like never ever ever drinking, but it's like it's happening maybe once, twice a year for a special occasion. It's just not like part of the everyday, every week routine. And yeah, it's definitely something that doesn't support your recovery capacity when you really want to lift heavy and perform in the gym and do all those things.
Yeah, 100%. So anyways, go back to the macros. So 4 calories per gram of protein and carbohydrate, 9 calories per gram for fat.
Does that now mean that you should always eat low fat, sorry?
No, it does not.
Because that was one of the reasons why I was cutting out a lot of fats, is because it was giving me a lot of calories, right? And I wanted to save calories, and so I was cutting out a lot of fat, and I was skipping it for meals, because then I thought like, okay, easy way to save calories.
Yeah, which is absolutely true. You know, when you are in a calorie deficit, then like fat is the most energy dense macronutrient, and it doesn't give you a lot of volume. Like most fat rich food don't have a lot of volume, which means the energy density is very high. It's not going to be super filling, and your hunger or lack thereof is going to be triggered by 2 things. So you have chemoreceptors in your body that are going to measure the amount of calories that you are getting. So it measures the amino acids, the blood glucose, and blood fat, and then based on that, then your body knows like how many calories are coming in. But at the same and this is going to trigger a hunger response or not. So if you eat a lot of calories, then your body is going to say like, hey, we don't need to be hungry right now. But at the same time, it's also going to measure food volume through mechanoreceptors that you have in your stomach. And when the muscle around your stomachs are being stretched, then the mechanoreceptors are going to feel that. And if you have a lot of food volume coming in, then it's also going to tell your body, to tell your brain like, hey, right now we don't need to be hungry. Obviously, you want to find the right balance, because if you eat a ton of volume with very, very little calories, for example, you're like, hey, I need to eat a lot of celery or a lot
lettuce.
of cucumber, lettuce, because it has very, very little calories, and you eat a ton of that, then it's going to just like expand your stomach and your belly, but you are still not going to feel truly satisfied, because you are lacking the calories and the energy that you need.
Well, one thing I'm thinking about is like rice crackers. You know those like rice thingies?
Yeah.
Like I was able to eat a ton of that.
Yeah,
it's like
you are eating
it weighs nothing, right? But I was like, yeah, then I can like put something on that, and it's like giving me less calories.
What did you put it?
I don't know. But I was never feeling full. I could just like continue eating and eating and eating and eating that.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Yeah.
So you want to find the right balance. And during a fat loss phase, then you want a bit more volume with a bit less calories. But when you're at maintenance, or especially if you go into a building phase, then it's going to be the opposite, so that you can tolerate the calories that you are eating, and that you don't feel just stuffed and absolutely full like all the time. And so the reason we talk about that is because, you know, you have to kind of make the translation between the food that you are eating and the calories. And if you understand that, for example, chicken breast has roughly 23 grams of protein for 100 grams of one chicken breast, then you're going to understand like, okay, this is this many calories, that it fits in my budget, but also it's going to help me hit the macro targets that I have for each macro. And then this is where you get to actually ditch the diet that tells you have to cut this food out because it's bad. And instead of that, you get to decide on your own terms what's going to be fitting for your needs and based on what you prefer to eat. So this is a bit the premise of flexible dieting, is like, hey, there are many different ways to hit your macros. So talking about protein, you could eat like chicken breast, but you could also go with eggs white. Sorry, because I ate them this morning. You could go with shrimps. You could go with tempeh. You could, even take into consideration all the protein that you get from legumes.
You can do like broccoli.
You could do broccoli.
You could try, right? You would have a lot of volume for very little protein.
Yeah. Fuck my life.
Yeah, but that's like kind of the thinking, right? So as you are getting more into it, you will learn like, I always like to say like food tracking is like learning a language, right? It does take a little bit of practice and trying things out, and then also seeing what works for you and what doesn't. For example, if you need to hit 120 grams of protein a day and you're trying to fill that only with veggies, it's going to be a little bit tough on your stomach and your gut. So it's fun to go through those like little experiments on your own as well, because you then truly learn what is in the different types of foods and what are the different foods also dominant in, right? I like to always consume stuff that is dominant in one macronutrient and put this way my meals together.
Yeah. This is exactly what I was about to say.
Is that step 3?
No.
Okay.
It's step 2.5. Just to close that, we have like different categories, and mainly we have like lean protein, then we have protein and fat, we also have like protein and carbs, then we have mainly carbs, then we have mainly fat, and fat and protein. So those are slightly different. I mentioned first like protein and fat. So for me, this is going to be like fattier cut of meat and fattier cut of fish. For me, they are still like a protein source first, and then you get also some extra fat with it. Whereas the other one, the fat and protein, is going to be mainly fat, but you also get extra protein with it. So it's going to be nuts, for example.
Peanut butter.
Yeah, exactly.
Peanut
butter.
So when someone tells me peanut butter is my protein source, I'm like, no. It's like it's mainly your fat source. It also gives you a little bit of protein, but it's not like dominant in protein.
It adds up to the protein intake, but
100%.
You're not going to be able to hit like your protein intake, your protein target, and your fat target if your main protein source is going to be peanut butter, because the relationship between the two is going to be too high towards the fat. I would also put eggs in that category. Egg white is a great source of protein, but in one egg you do have a bit more fat than
in a full egg.
In a full egg.
You just said egg white.
So sorry, in a full egg you have a bit more fat than protein, and then most cheese are also going to be in that category of a bit more fat and some added protein, which is also a very high quality protein, but it's still like predominantly a fat source. And then the last one is going to be high fat, high carbs, and this is most of the time those are processed food, because you don't really find carbohydrates that are also high in fat
in nature.
And this is not like an appeal to nature. So it's not because it's in nature this way then it's better, but it's really to say like, hey, most of the time the high fat, high carb food is going to be a combination of fat and carb.
Because it's just tasty.
And then you add some salt. And then you have like the perfect combination to just want to eat more of that
like
forever.
Chocolate.
Like Nutella.
Oh, Nutella.
Nutella with a pinch of salt. Okay, and the last point about the macros is, in the context of trying to optimize your body composition and building muscle and going for the active, healthy lifestyle that you want to maintain for as long as possible. If this is your goal, then by definition, you are going to need a fair bit of carbohydrate. And yes, protein is important, but there's so much talk about how important protein is right now, especially for women,
Because of the
that
muscles.
that the whole discussion has turned towards the protein,
Yeah.
and carbs are still like kind of demonized and
Yeah.
not seen as something that is very good or even can be inherently fattening, and it's actually not the case.
There are just like so many. I find that people like to find so many drawbacks of carbs that people talk about on social media, like your blood sugar and inflammation and insulin, and like they're coming up with all those things. And no wonder that a lot of women are a little bit like, carbs, yeah, I'm a little bit cautious, or I'm on the lower end, or I'm trying to avoid them. When you're looking at protein, you don't have that much talk of like what can happen if you're eating too much of protein, and you're neglecting the other macronutrients, for example.
Which I guess is fair, because a lot of women in the general population are still eating like too little protein. But for the women who's already like quite active and engaged and trying to improve her body composition and her health and is lifting weight, then
protein is rarely the problem. Like rarely, like if we have a more so beginner lady starting with us, like working with us, then we see that, I have a hard time to hit my protein goals. But usually, like I would say 90% of the ladies we work with, they don't have a problem with hitting their protein targets.
I think even like 95%.
Yeah.
So in the last roughly 9 months, we onboarded through the challenge, but also in the community, in the Strong Babes Club, we onboarded like, I don't remember exactly the number, but roughly around 300 ladies. And they fill out like a pretty extensive intake form at the beginning, so that we have an understanding of where they come from and what's going to be most helpful for them. And I think we have maybe like 1% or 2% of ladies who are still eating quote unquote too little protein, but it was not like too little in the sense like you are wildly undershooting protein. It was like, okay, it's more on the low side. Yeah, it's more on the low side, but like assuming that you keep doing this and everything else is taken care of and improved, then it's not going to be a huge limiting factor. Whereas 5 years ago, when we started, almost 6 years ago now, it was something we had to constantly talk about, and it was a lot of the coaching that we were doing was like, how are you going to hit your protein target today, and how are you going to eat enough protein throughout the day? And a lot of women telling us like, how am I going to eat like 100 gram or 120 gram of protein? And now it's almost the opposite, in the sense that sometimes we have to bring the protein down, and it's not like it doesn't happen super often, but often enough that a lady come and the protein target is like 3 times her body weight in kilo. So that's very high. That's almost 1.5 times your weight in pound.
And oftentimes at the expense of carbs. Like,
and very often at the expense of carbs. And just to give you context, like one of the greatest bodybuilder of all time, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he just preached like 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, which is slightly higher than it's slightly higher than 2 grams per kilo of body weight. But as long as you're in that range, then actually your protein needs are taken care of, and then you should focus on the other macros. So this is super important, because we see that quite often, especially with women who are active, who are trying to push in the gym, to apply progressive overload and also do some cardio on the side, because they've heard that, VO2 max is super important for longevity and health, or because they understand that having some low intensity cardio thrown in the mix is going to help with recovery, but it increased the activity level, and this activity needs fuel first and foremost. almost 80% of the calories that we burn when we are active is going to be lost, quote unquote, lost in heat. And it's purely about just burning energy. And you need fuel for that. Protein is a terrible, like very bad fuel source. Carbohydrate is much better. Fat is all right, but it's not that good when you are doing some high intensity stuff. And lifting weight is by definition high intensity. And so we just want to drive this point home that you definitely need the carbohydrate. And we see that all the time with the women that we work with. First, that they are able to lose weight despite eating carbohydrate, like all the time we see with this very consistently. But also, in general, life just is better when you are eating more carbs.
100%.
And
like your sleep is better, your digestion is better, your energy is better, you're not hangry like all the time, less irritated, less moody. Like there are a lot of benefits, and there are also a lot of symptoms, even with like digestion and like having a lot of bloating that can be related to doing, for example, a lot of high intensity stuff in the gym, lifting weights, doing the cardio, and then being bloated because a lack of carbohydrates, like just one thing that can happen. But oftentimes we don't make that connection. And I think one thing we are exceptionally good at is figuring out when a woman comes to us and has those symptoms or is experiencing any side effects, and she's like, I don't know why this is not working or why I'm having this, and she can't find the needle in the hay, is that we are finding it, and that we can like pinpoint on that specifically and be like, let's try to change this one thing.
Yeah, because we, as I said, like we have those intakes form that's pretty detailed, and we have like the whole system mapped out of every levers that you need to I was going to say like to transform your body, but it's not only to transform your body, it's just also to change like your state and how your body is operating. And so if you want to dip your toes into that and you're like, oh, this is quite interesting, we have the fueling formula, and it's really going to help you like setting that base, that foundation with the proper macro targets and the proper food choices and the proper meal timing, so that each meal is not going to be a huge quantity of protein with very little of everything else, or a huge bowl of rice or cereals with no fat and no protein. But it's really going to help you have very good hunger management, have very good energy management, and most likely it can also help you improve your digestion. So if you want that, then the link will be below in the description. And that's all I had to say for today.
100%. Until next time. Bye-bye.